Let's commence session 1, day 2 of the conference on the theme Global Value Chains, Building MSME Competitiveness through Value Chain Integration. May I invite our esteemed panelists, Dr. Preetham Banerjee, Senior Director, South Asia, Corporate Public Policy, Deutsche Post, DHL Group, Mr. John A. Ford, President, the Federation of National Associations of Ship Brokers and Agents, Mr. Mahinder Chu, President, Kiretsu Forum Global Angel Network, Mumbai, Ms. Victoria Lopatina, Founder and Managing Director, Cattle International Trade Consulting, SRLS, Mr. O.P. Hisaria, Senior Vice President, Reliance Industries Limited, Mr. Jiandev Rajiv Rimul, CEO, PSA Advisors Limited, and Mr. Tim Nicole, Founder and CEO, Prima Dollar Group.
Also, we are honored to have Shri Jaikumar Rawalji, Honorable Minister for Employment Guarantee Scheme and Tourism, Government of Maharashtra.
Dr. Sidharth Roy, former Economic Advisor, Tata Group. May I briefly introduce Dr. Roy. Dr. Sidharth Roy is a retired economic advisor to the $102 billion Tata Group. As an advisor to the Tata Group, he closely monitored the economic and trade policy-related developments across geographies, particularly in sectors like auto, chemicals, steel, power, telecom, hospitality, FMGC, IT, and etc. He is on the expert committees of the leading chambers of commerce. I heartily welcome Dr. Roy and request him to start with the panel discussion.
Thank you. We have a set of experts in the panel. All I will do is to give a brief introduction and then go ahead with the panel discussion. Whenever you talk of global value chain or global sourcing or global supply chain, as the minister said just now, what is really important is to find out countries which have political stability, where the currency is less volatile, where the infrastructure is reasonably developed, and we have less problems at the border. Now, if you look at all these conditions, most of them in some form or the other is present in India. If that is so, there is no reason why Indian MSMEs should not be taking advantage of it and going ahead. Secondly, if you look at the advantages that we have got, one of the things which has been pointed out repeatedly is the advantage in the field of labor. I would like to remind you of a very interesting economic phenomenon which was first pointed out by the Japanese economist Akamatsu, which is also known as the flying geese. One country takes the lead, all the labor-intensive industries post Second World War were in Japan, then they moved to Korea, then they moved to Taiwan and the Asian tigers, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. Then finally to China. Now they are moving out of China. Will India have its day? That remains to be seen, but they have already moved to Vietnam. They are moving to other South Asian countries, including Sri Lanka. And of course, there is an opportunity of these things moving out to the labor-intensive economies of Africa. Now, the question is, in this whole process, all we see is that labor-intensive industries per se do not give you competitive advantage. If you want competitive advantage, we have to look at customization, you have to look at designs, you have to look at brand names, that is to say the front end of the value chain. Can the MSMEs get into the front end of the value chain? That's a major question. We have a set of interesting speakers. The speakers have expertise in various fields. We have people from outside the country. There is someone from there is a speaker from Italy who can talk about the experience of Italian MSMEs, because that's a country where a large part of the industrial thrust has come from MSMEs. We have speakers who are from the logistics industry on my both sides, who can tell about how we can bring down the logistics cost as a percentage of the value added and possibly provide greater sort of competitiveness to the industry and MSMEs. Then we have speakers who can talk about trade facilitation and border valuations so that we can get an idea as to how the signing of the trade facilitation, signing of the WTO thing and with trade facilitation going through, how that is advantageous to us or not so advantageous to us. Then we have speakers from outside the country who are interested in investing in MSMEs, who are venture capitalists, so we can find out what is it that they are looking for in Indian industry. Then we have investors who are based in countries like Mauritius and who want to take Indian MSMEs possibly to African continent and other SEZs which they are trying to develop. So I am sure we are going to have a very interesting discussion. Now over to the panelists. Maybe we can start with the first panelist, who is Mr. Chuk, who is a venture capitalist himself and who is interested in investing in India.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Siddharth, for a wonderful introduction. And, passing the ball to the first guy is always a tough part, right? Sets the tone. And he doesn't realize, but I'm fairly controversial in terms of the tone I will set for all of us, because I've looked at MSMEs as a trade issue. When I was in ICICI, we ran the largest export development program, assisting a lot of Indian companies who you see are at the cutting edge of exports today. But that was highly export-oriented, trade-related. We made investments, but more focused on the supply chain and the trade. And what do I do today? Actually, we work in the startup space. A lot of people perhaps here are wondering what is startups got to do with MSME. But actually, that is the future for the world. Not just India, for the world, because the race is no more for labor arbitrage, as he mentioned. The race for labor arbitrage, in my mind, is over. It perhaps could go into certain other markets, but it's done for India. The amount of talent we have in this country is unbelievable. You have to really go and look. When I was in ICICI, we used to look for talent, and we got the best of the pick from the IITs and the IIMs. Today, ask the talent at the best institution. None of them want to work for banking. Nobody wants to go into consulting. Everybody wants to do startup. It's the wave of entrepreneurship, and that makes me extremely happy and proud that entrepreneurship through the disruption route. You'll be surprised at the number of technologies we see almost every day. And I am part of a global forum called the Karitsu Forum, which is the world's largest angel network. It has more than 3,000 angels across the world. It has 55 chapters across the world. We own and run the Mumbai chapter because we are more interested in India. But we get deals from all over the world, cross-border investments as well as local investments. We evaluate every single month. We evaluate more than 100 deals, and we invest in perhaps 3 or 4 at the most. We present to our angels here in Mumbai itself, and we evaluate these deals, and we bring about the investment both within our country as well as overseas. We also help them tie up, you can call it the chain, you can call it value chain. We help them tie up with markets and investors and technologies which would benefit them, which is part of their global strategy. We do that at a micro level, and we see the kind of talent that is available not only here, but talent working on a cross-border basis. We've seen companies working in the valley with a backend here in India, with another sort of developer technology or maybe product developer in some other part of the world. So it's no more regional anymore. Even research and development, product development are now diverse and are working from different parts of the world. In other words, I think Siddharth told us up front, you got just 7 minutes, and I'm trying to see how to economize on that. We have so many people on the panel. Interestingly, what is it that people look for? And I can see in the audience, there are people from the trade background. I can see 3 profiles basically. One is an investor, the other is an entrepreneur, and the third is a policymaker. So if I'm sitting on the audience side, I'm asking myself a question. What is this panel going to give me? What is it available to me as an entrepreneur? What is available to me as an investor? What is available to me as a policymaker? And rather than give you numbers as to what is happening in that space, all I'm going to say is from my own experience, I'll share my experience in terms of all 3 segments over here. If you're an entrepreneur, then I think while you may be a medium, small, whatever, micro, the definition is no more important. The issue really lies, what are you good at? What are you great at? What can you do with the talent you have? What kind of talent you can put together? And what can you do with that to become a disruptor? We do not work in the space which is an existing space. We work in the space which is going to be the future disruptors. And we are seeing so much disruption going to happen. To give you an example, many of you are talking about manufacturing. Just imagine what happens if 3D printing really becomes viable. There will be no manufacturing the way we see it today. The whole of manufacturing will change if just one technology finds root. Similarly, there are so many technologies which are potential disruptors. However, as an entrepreneur, my basic worry, if I'm on your side, is how do I raise funds? How do I manage this? What does it take for me to become successful? What is the chance and the mortality rate in this business? The mortality rate can be so high. Out of 100 companies, 1 company will survive. And that company can become a major disruptor. But why people still go and invest in 100 companies? Because there is a potential for that. There is a potential for being that one company which will survive and do extremely well. If I'm an investor, my concern is how do I find that one company which is going to be a major successful story? And that is the whole game where policy initiatives and the government structures help. Now look at what is happening in the rest of the world. In the startup space, in the technology space, it is attracting the best talent. It is attracting even what we call non-dilutive grant funding from government, from universities, from accelerators. It's a whole ecosystem which has been created to encourage not just research, but to encourage research which ends up in being a product and a service which can disrupt some of the existing so-called value chains, if you may call it. And that is what people are looking forward towards. And as a policymaker, my concern is how do I balance between taxation? How do I balance between getting the best out of the new generating technologies, out of the new generating entrepreneurship? How do I balance between taking a fair part of the tax at the same time being smart enough to encourage? And we have so many examples. You look at China where it was, and today we are seeing even in the valley, in the Silicon Valley, some of the best research that is happening. You look at behind who is putting money into that research. Chinese, Israelis, Japanese are putting research money behind Silicon Valley research that is happening with a very clear understanding that that technology can be leveraged in their part of the world. That is the kind of opportunity for us as policymakers that is available to us. Thank you.
Good morning to everybody. Namaste. I'm very glad to be here today and would like to thank you World Trade Center for inviting me. And I'm really proud to be here. As I represent today Italy, I would like to spend a few words about Italian position for small and medium enterprises and their position in European countries. So during the last 2 decades, especially since joining the European Union in 2004, Eastern European countries have developed intensive bilateral trade linkages in industrial inputs with other European countries. And joining the European Union and adopting European Union regulations have been conducive to development of these ties within European global value chains. In European countries, manufacturing exchanges with foreign countries have increasingly focused on non-European European Union markets, where the final demand is more dynamic. Analyzing the components related to the global value chains, the added value generated along the regional chains of European value means those that short supply chains and for long ones. And there is, however, another important channel of activation that concerns that long global value chains that extends first within the European Union borders and then out to intercept the final extra-European demand. The regional chains of European value have straightened and at the same time have become more deeply integrated with the world supply chains. And therefore European countries are increasingly partners more than competitors in global competition. And I think that main reasons for this collaboration within European Union borders, the distances, especially the language and cultural similarities. The good performance of the Italian manufacturing sector has been associated with an increase in all channels of participation in foreign markets. And most of increase is associated with the growth in components related to global value chains, participating both in long and short ones, and its specialization at the high end of the global value chains proved to be a very competitive advantage because it allows to Italian companies to maintain within their national bodies production processes of high technology and quality, which increase knowledge and skills and generating highly qualified and better paid jobs. Speaking about Italian micro, small and medium enterprises, I would say that Italian SMEs represent most of Italian economy and they're around 95%. Often small companies alone, they have some difficulties confronting globalization and penetration to the global trade. So to become stronger, Italian companies have decided to join together through the consortium, is a network of companies creating in this way a local value chain before getting into the global value chains. So the first consortium were born around 40 years ago on a far-sighted vision of our legislator that disciplined the rules and facilitated the activities, convinced that only with the synergies and the small Italian enterprises full of creativity and with excellent production can penetrate and take root with the market share in foreign countries. And currently, they are widespread through the Italian territory and they work quite well. Another form of networking was born in 2009 when the legislator introduced a new form of aggregation named rete di impresa, that means a networking contract. Both of these forms, they are very convenient for small companies, for small businesses, because they allow them to deal with the international markets in easier and more successful and more secure way. They also give many benefits, such as facilitated access and to finance and for funds. Actually, we have different funds on the regional, national and European level. Sharing of experiences for participation in some international events or exhibitions, creating a more complete and competitive proposal for foreign markets, and greater availability of human resources. Also, the Italian government has created important measures to support our small companies. And in September 2016, Italian government presented the National Plan for Industria 4.0, so named Fourth Industrial Revolution. With the definition of Industry 4.0, reference is made to a new business management model, which based on the connection between physical and digital system, in other words, I would say the integration of the technology necessary for the production and their connection to the web. And this plan introduced a series of stimulus measures for investment in innovation and competitiveness. Characteristic of these incentives of the automatic activation without any need for call and without dimensional or sector contains. Just to name a few of them, there are hyper amortization and super amortization to intensify investment in new and functional capital goods for the technological and digital transformation of production processes. Sabatini law, usually we used to give a minister's name for the laws, so this law has a Sabatini minister name. Sabatini law to support companies that require bank financing for investment in new capital goods. Tax credit of 50% of incremental expenses in research and development. A very important measure that is a patent box is a special measures to incentivize the placement in Italy of the intangible assets currently held abroad by Italian or foreign companies, and some other special measures to support innovative startups and small and medium enterprises. On the year on, the government measures proved to be very effective, and therefore Italy seems well positioned to strengthen its role in the international industrial program, thanks also to this effective economic stimulus action taken by government. I would like to say that there was another very useful support introduced, that is a figure of a temporary export manager. Is a new professional outsourced figure which helps to micro and small companies to penetrate into the global trade, and the list of highly specialized companies for these services is available also on the website of the Ministry of Economic Development. And so all the companies who are interested in this figure can apply for intensives. Concluding, I would like to say that to be small, it not means not to be smart. And I also think that it's very important that small and medium companies should invest in educate their personnel, skill them, to be networked, and to invest in the new technologies and to be innovative. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Roy. My concerns start from where the broader policy has been put in place. We all agree that global value chains add value to all the participants in the chain. But once the broad policy contours have been set, then how do we implement them, and how economic actors efficiently become part of those global value chains? So it's axiomatic in global value chains that goods and services will move from one country to other, from A to B, B to C, C to D, before they finally become consumable products or services. So there are a lot of B2B international transactions. We all know moving goods across borders have their own related implications, compliance requirements. So if I talk in context of India, that Indian MSMEs becoming part of global value chain. So the first and foremost thing which will come to anybody's mind is whether our border infrastructure is adequate, and secondly, whether the border clearance procedures, that is customs, whether they are conducive to such kind of transactions, where the transfer of goods is not exactly for consumption, it's for inward processing. I get a particular commodity, I process it, give it back to somebody else. So there is simultaneously import and export transactions. And if if the border infrastructure and border clearance procedures are not efficient enough, then we create obstacles in the value chain. So then the continuous processing methodology or the continuous processing principle that we think that global value chain are adding efficient manufacturing to the system, that gets impacted. So that is one thing which is really important for any for any country to become part of global value chain, is adequacy of border infrastructure, at the same time the friendliness of border clearance procedures. One issue which have been faced by a large number of, especially MSMEs, is the way valuation of these transactions is conducted. You know, by definition, if you are part of a value chain, then the two transacting parties are related. They are not at arm's length. Once they are related, then the valuation in customs law as well as in direct tax law has their own implication. So to put it in a very simplistic manner, that customs would like the value of goods for dutiable purposes to be the highest, so that they can get their share of revenue, their fair share of revenue. But at the same time, the direct tax people would look this into from transfer pricing concept, and they would feel that you are trying to overvalue the imported goods so that you are reducing the value addition part in this country to avoid the direct taxes. So this conflict has impacted a large number of operators who wanted to be or who are part of global value chains. If you are large enough, you can afford to be having a team, a well-paying team, which can argue your cases, which can ensure your smoother clearances and smoother compliances. But if you are a MSME, then sometimes these costs and these hurdles can virtually make or mar your business. So here, there is a lot of work which needs to be done by authorities, where this whole process is smoothened. I'm talking in context of India. In some of the Southeast Asian countries, these rules have been put in place, like for inward processing rules. So they are smoother, the valuation disputes are less, their border infrastructure is better, their border clearance procedures also have been to a large extent streamlined. Having said that, in recent years there have been a number of small steps which have been taken by, especially in border clearance processes within India. They should, in medium to long term, facilitate Indian MSMEs to become a greater part of the global value chains. So my concern here basically, so once we have a broader policy in place, then the concept will take off only if these nuts and bolts are put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roy, and thanks to WTC for inviting me over here. Just a very brief background on the Deutsche Post DHL Group. We are arguably the world's largest logistics company, and we touch all segments of logistics. So we do ocean and air freight, we do expedited air shipments, we do domestic trucking and warehousing. We are also, Blue Dart, which is India's largest domestic express company, is also part of our group. Essentially, we are into all segments of logistics. So in some ways, we have a bird's eye view of the supply chain issues that affect MSMEs, especially in the context of what happens in India. So, taking from what Mr. Hisaria just said on border infrastructure, I'd like to put a little bit more context around that. The first point is that a lot of the international shipment that happens, especially if it's containerized shipments we're talking about, they go in liner shipping networks, and the costs over there are manageable in the sense they are standardized. But the cost of moving something from the hinterland in India to a gateway port or airport sometimes is prohibitively high. To just give you one example, the cost of moving something from a major cluster of MSMEs in Ludhiana in Punjab to the port of JNPT here in Maharashtra is sometimes higher than the cost of moving the container from JNPT to Europe, to Rotterdam or some other place like that. So these are the kind of challenges that we face in terms of organizing shipments. And if you're trying to send a less than container load small shipment, those challenges become even more significant for you. So how do we go forward in finding solutions for that? One way, of course, is to see what other countries have done, in the greater neighborhood, countries like Malaysia, like Thailand, who have worked over a few decades to reduce these costs and create an ecosystem of services that will reduce your overall logistics costs. This requires attracting investment in various types of logistics services. What we have seen as a logistics service provider in this country is that when we try to bring such solutions to India, we often face regulatory hurdles in terms of putting together either an infrastructure project at airport or a port, or starting different services from our end. So, and these basically stem from the fact that you have multiple agencies which regulate the setting up of an infrastructure at the airport, for example. So you have 6 different ministries who need to give approvals for a single project at the airport, and that often takes time and induce a huge amount of costs in getting these projects underway. That's one part of the challenge. The other is that even regulatory aspects of having a different kind of a business model. For example, globally what domestic trucking companies do is what they call multiple trailer single horse, which means you can have several trailers which can be pulled by different horses or different prime movers. This is a common business model across the world. In India, there was a lack of clarity in the Motor Vehicles Act, and it took us 3.5 years to get a clarification to even start this kind of business. I'm giving these illustrative examples which are very micro level to illustrate to you that there are very specific issues in having efficient operations sometimes, which will have great benefit for MSMEs, and it takes a lot of time. I'll just make 2 quick points before I end. Another important aspect of what Mr. Isaria was referring to, without getting into the details, is that there has been a lot of movement in terms of reforms and customs reforms initiatives, etc. that has happened from the top level of the government of India. But I think many of us who are in logistics business or in trade will agree that oftentimes it doesn't percolate down to the ground level, which means the ecosystem at the port or airport is not fully implementing the spirit of those reforms. So change is much slower at the ground level, and in both the policy makers at the higher levels of government and trade, we don't know how to get around this animal. How do we get implementation to be better? I think that's a challenge for all of us. Lastly, I think an interesting phenomena that has come in the last 6-7 years has been the e-commerce, which has enabled a lot of MSMEs to participate in the global value chain, to sell directly to consumers abroad. Even there we face some regulatory hurdles specific to India. Just to give you 2 illustrative examples, the government of India gives export incentives, but if you are a small exporter, you're doing 50 small shipments, you have to then claim these incentives by every small shipment, and the cost of processing getting the export incentives is much more expensive than the incentive you would get, which defeats the entire purpose of having these incentives in the first place. Secondly, for various legacy reasons, you are not allowed to send commercial exports beyond the value of 25,000 rupees using the courier mode. If you are in e-commerce and your consumer abroad in Europe or North America expects what you are selling to be at their door in 5, 6, 7 days, there is no other means of logistics you can use besides courier. So I think we have a lot of micro level small issues, many of them that exist today. If we can find ways to address them quickly, these are low hanging fruits, and even just addressing these low hanging fruits will give us a much better access to the global value chains for our businesses, for our SMEs. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.